I'm Liam.
I'm Wayne,
You're listening to In Film We Trust YouTube.
a place where we post clips from our recent episode.
All links down below in the description.
And now, on with the show.
Funnily enough, for a genre that came to importance in the 70s, the term wasn't actually coined until Tarantino, of all people, said Ozploitation. And that was shortened by Mark Hartley, who was the director of Not Quite Hollywood, The Wild Untold Story, and he shortened it to Ozploitation.
Yeah, I'll be honest, obviously the term exploitation we're all very familiar with, but I'd never really heard the term Ozploitation used that much. I would just have said Australian exploitation. I've never thought of even shortening it to that.
Which is a strange thing, because all these different countries, whether it's America or that, it's almost cut into subgenres. You have sexploitation, then you have the cheap horror films. Yet in Australia, everything is termed Ozploitation.
It's under like an umbrella term.
Yeah,
basically.
whether it's the sexploitation films, the action films, the horror, etc., isn't it?
Is it because you think Australia just doesn't turn out as many mainstream movies as the like of America does?
Well, prior to 1970, Australia was only averaging about 20 films per year. 20 films, just.
Very little. But you have to think, in the history of Australian cinema, 1906, The Story of the Kelly Gang was the first ever feature film. It was about 60 minutes, but of course a lot of it's been lost. And I think only 17 minutes remain, which you can watch fully on YouTube.
What kind of film was that, Wayne?
It was a bushranger film, because obviously
right.
back at the time, it's about the Kelly Gang. That was a very big genre at the time, like outlaws, people fighting in the bush.
So similar to the Ozploitation film Mad Dog Morgan with Dennis Hopper.
Very similar. Of course, very primitive filming techniques, but very important for the time, because Australia, around the kind of First World War, just before First World War, they were making about 90 films a year.
90 films?
But 90 films, but as time went on, there was a massive bust, because they've had a lot of like peaks and ditches in Australian cinema history.
In the 1970s, Australia had a film boom.
It did, because there was two of the Aussie Prime Ministers, Gorton and Whitlam, who came very close to each other. They put a lot of funding back into arts and film, which led to this renaissance of Aussie movies.
Well, they done it craftily. They done tax cuts. So people were funding these cheap films for a profit, because them putting their money into these films, by very doing that, they were getting tax cuts.
Yeah, was Australia just a cheaper place to film? Because I know if you film in somewhere like Los Angeles, it'll cost a lot. That's why I hear Breaking Bad was filmed in New Mexico, because it was a lot cheaper there to film it.
Well, I wonder that as well, because if you're in the outback, you can do it a very guerrilla style. There's a good chance you're never going to be noticed, isn't
Well,
there?
you're not going to need permits, because there's a lot of outback in Australia, so you could film anything you wanted there.
As you would know, because you've been to Australia.
Yeah, I was 2 years in Australia, which is why, again, talking about anything Aussie, I really enjoy, because a lot of it does remind me of being back there.
I was just trying that way, and I was thinking, how can we get Wayne's experience in Australia? We got it with Upgrade, and there's possibly another film. We got it again, so we're good.
Yeah, we're on an Aussie roll here.
An Aussie roll.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Upgrade, is that Ozploitation? I know technically you could end it in the 80s, couldn't you?
Cyberpunk exploitation.
Plunk's a different thing.
Yes, Plunk is a bit different. But when we talk about this time, kind of the 70s, moving on there, Australia was actually described as being one of the most repressive countries on earth. Like, erotic novels were banned, a lot of movies were banned, lots of comics were banned as well. But then Australia, almost overnight, became this very liberal country, and that helped with this new wave of Australian films.
Was there a mass liberalisation?
There must have been. No Mary Whitehouses over there.
Well, was it 70? It was either 70 or 71 where Australia introduced the R rating.
Yeah, I think it was 71.
So you got these slew of sexploitation films what would cater to this R rating, because they knew, all right, this is a new thing, isn't it? Let's cater to that market, because people will be willing to go see this.
So basically, they brought in this R rating, and everybody kind of jumped on it as their chance to make these films. Like when we did Censor, like when they had the Video Nasty thing, when they found this loophole, suddenly everybody made these kind of films, and this is basically what the Australians were doing.
Interestingly, I think it was Mark Kermode I was once listening to, and this was a while, so I'm paraphrasing, and he said, for all these artistic directors, whether they be Australian or whoever, like Baz Luhrmann, you need an exploitation market for people to develop their skills when they're new and bring in the audience.
Yeah, because nobody starts off on these big budget pictures. You have to start somewhere like James Cameron himself started on, like, was it like Piranha 3D or Piranha 2 or something like that? So you've got to start somewhere. You have to hone your craft at some place.
And it's very effective, because I don't know about you, but I'd rather watch this film than any Baz Luhrmann film.
Definitely, yeah. Like I'm not a Baz Luhrmann fan at all. I don't think I've really liked any of his films, to be honest.
Don't hold back, Wayne.
No, but again, like
Do we have to hire security for Baz Luhrmann here?
no, it's not that. Great Gatsby, that was one of his films, wasn't it?
I actually didn't mind Great Gatsby.
Yes, I only seen bits of it, but when you had this new wave, which led to Ozploitation, what you had is you had filmmakers in Australia that were making movies that kind of borrowed from American horror and exploitation. They were making these kind of films because this would appeal to like international markets.
Yeah, but they would exploit Australian stereotypes and cultural norms for Australia, wouldn't they? Which all kind of exploitation does, because you get in America, obviously, the blaxploitation, which would kind of exploit and kind of examine the seedier aspects of black culture. And this, you could say, you've got your biker films, you've got your horror films, but kind of the seedier side of Australian life.
They almost always took a kind of negative, they shone like a negative light on it. And yeah, with Ozploitation films, there's very classic elements. There's the rough terrain, the outback life, especially hostile locals, hostile and untrusting locals. Because, like I say, I lived in Australia. The majority,
you got it in again.
Yeah, the majority of Australians, they're just lovely, very hospitable people. But if the only thing you knew about Australia was what you see in these films, you'd imagine everybody was a psychopath there.
The psychos left when you left, Wayne.
They came with me. Yeah.
Do you think, is there a Britsploitation? Have you heard of Britsploitation?
No.
There must be.
Well, we do have those kind of great
Yeah,
films.
we
like,
have them. But
you mean like your Get Carter kind of films?
Yeah, but was it ever termed Britsploitation?
I've never heard of it. Probably does exist. Like I say, I'd never heard of Ozploitation, but Britsploitation probably does exist. Again, this would be your gangsters, people running like seedy pubs and brothels and stuff like that.
Yeah, almost like the Cray twins, etc.
Yeah, the kind of back alley kind of.
I think we've got an idea here, Wayne.
Yes, I think this will be our next.
We have to run with this.
This will be our own picture, but
so notable directors of this genre. Obviously, we've got the Roadgames director Richard Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Hitchcock, isn't he?
He was kind of a protege because I believe he was with Hitchcock when Hitchcock made Topaz.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, and obviously observing Hitchcock, there's not many people, if you're going to make a horror film, there's not many people better to learn from than Hitch.
And Richard Franklin is... Oh, no, sorry. Brian Trenchard Smith is Tarantino's favourite director of Ozploitation.
Yeah, is he?
But this is his favourite film. Roadgames is his favourite film of Ozploitation. But I'm sure Brian Trenchard Smith was the favourite director of Tarantino.
Oh, okay. Then
who is a huge Ozploitation fan.
Yeah, because, again, we were saying about getting your start in Ozploitation films. Two of the biggest names I came across were Peter Weir and George Miller. So they started off in these kind of low-budget things.
George Miller being the director of the Mad Max films.
And Peter Weir, who directed Picnic at Hanging Rock. That was one of his big Aussie
is that
movies.
An Ozploitation film?
I think it kind of is. It's more like a mystery. It's maybe more like an almost like Australian Giallo kind of film.
Oh, interesting.
But obviously he would go on to direct things like, was it like The Truman Show?
Well, George Miller would do Babe.
Babe and Happy Feet.
Meh, let's not mention that.
Pretty far away from where he started, but
and Nicole Kidman, her second film, BMX Bandits.
Only her second film.
I think it was her second film. It was done in the same year as her first film.
Again, another big actor, like people like again Hugh Jackman, because obviously he would have had to start small, and he's just blown up to be a big star now.
Which is isn't it such a great way to hone your craft? Whether you're a director or an actor, you get to work on this type of material.
You mean kind of low risk kind of material, because you're not going to lose a lot if the movie doesn't do well, because they're low budgeted films.
But for all the kind of low budget we speak about, there's also Walkabout. Did that not have Jenny Agutter in? From
Jenny Agutter. Yeah, I think she was in that one.
And that was directed by Nick Rogue, who done the tremendous film Performance with Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, yeah. So you have these, like I say, you have these directors who have gone on to big success, but started honing their craft in this genre, which I think, like I say, Ozploitation is a very kind of under-talked about genre.
Especially until the documentary, Not Quite Hollywood.
That was 2008, wasn't
2008,
it? Which was, I think, where Tarantino did come out and he said, he actually coined the term exploitation, like you say.
Ozploitation,
And he revealed that Roadgames is his favourite, was it his favourite Australian movie or just favourite Ozploitation?
I don't know, because you don't know with Tarantino, because he's such a genre fan. So, potentially, because it's his favourite Ozploitation film, it's potentially his favourite Australian film.
Yeah, I think before seeing Roadgames, for me, the most notable Ozploitation film I'd seen would have been Wake in Fright.
Mad Max.
From 19, or maybe Mad Maxwell, but from 1971, Wake in Fright. We spoke about the characteristics of Ozploitation with the locals and the rough terrain. That's very much epitomised in Wake and Fright. It's a mad film.
Is Donald Pleasance in that?
Donald Pleasance is in that.
He is in that.
Yeah, he plays a guy called Doc who I think is like either drunk or drugged out of his mind most of the time.
Is he a lot different to Sam Loomis in Halloween?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's a lot more kind of cut loose in that film.
Oh.
But Wake and Fright is a fantastic film. Very controversial because it featured, I believe, live shots of kangaroo hunting.
Oh, really?
But again, this is 1971, so this is before no animals were harmed in the making of this
So
film.
is it
disclaimer.
Australia's cannibal holocaust?
It basically is, yeah. It's, most of it, there's just guys drunk out in the middle of the outback just going insane. But like I say, it epitomised that Ozploitation feel.
I think everybody should go see some Ozploitation.
I think they should.